Welcome to Paint Yourself into the Picture, healing conversations to help us create the optimal picture of our lives. I'm Reba, best-selling author, life coach, and founder of A to Z Healing Space, and I'm so glad you're here. Our guest today is inspiring audiences that anything is possible. Meet Tracy Schmitt, leader, volunteer, disability advocate, and award-winning athlete. Get ready to find out what it means to be unstoppable. Welcome, Tracy.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction.
It's great to have you here. I'm so curious, like we were chatting a little before. I don't know much about your story, and I'm fascinated by your positivity. And I just want to know what gives you the strength to be unstoppable. You use that word in your title. You're unstoppable, Tracy Schmitt. How did you become unstoppable?
Well, it's a word that followed me wherever I go. They called me unstoppable in elementary school, and they called me unstoppable on the docks getting ready for sailing. They called me unstoppable at the Pan Am Games when I was manager of planning and integration. And they called me unstoppable on the ski slopes. They called me unstoppable at scuba diving, and they called me unstoppable at Air Canada, where I worked for 8 years, and also at Shoppers Drug Mart for 5 years. So the name followed me. So I finally decided in 2017 to embrace it properly.
Well, you are unstoppable. All that you've accomplished is incredible. You should be so proud, and it's just truly amazing. But what on the end, were you always this way? What was your greatest, was there a point in which you faced the obstacles and were like, I just can't do this? Was there a struggle involved, or were you just always like, I'm going to do this?
Well, there were many points and many times, and still, even now, writing the book Unstoppable You in January was a point where I just can't do this, or I've been trying to do it for years, and finally decided to take that leap and say, okay, I'm writing this book, Unstoppable You. And when I was able to flip it around and not be 100% about Unstoppable Tracy, but more framed in an opportunity for the Unstoppable You, that was my breakthrough. But, all my life, there's been events. And I think sort of the first time that was the biggest obstacle, I was lucky enough to grow up on a street that was as a result of winning a lottery for affordable housing. Wow. Everybody on our street were in affordable housing, and the government did this program that if you were away from home, like away from Canada, and you had 2 kids under the age of 6, that they would enter you into this lottery of housing. Wow. And so everybody, and part of why you had to be from away was because you didn't have friends and family to support you and help with survival as a young family. Mm-hmm. And so we won this lottery, and the street I grew up on, right up until kindergarten, all had 2 kids around the same age, 2 to 3 kids around the same age. Yeah. So come time to go to kindergarten, we had all had our Christmases and our Easters and our Thanksgivings. Everything was together because none of us had family in Canada. So they were my cousins, even though they were my neighbors.
I see. And
so first day of kindergarten, they say, we're going into kindergarten, and they tell my mom that Tracy can't go here. And my mom says, how come? And they said, Tracy doesn't have her hands, and she doesn't have her legs, and she needs to be able to tie her own shoelace, and she needs to be able to get ready for recess. And the teacher's got 30 kids. She can't spend time with Tracy. And so my mom was devastated, and she knew I'd be broken, and we understand why all other kids on the street were allowed. And I'm so super outgoing, if you haven't gathered. But my mom is this total introvert, complete thinker, complete feeler. And she somewhere found the strength in her to counteroffer and say, well, Tracy can do these things. And they didn't believe her. And so she said, well, can we try Tracy for 1 week? And if it works, then she stays. And if it doesn't, we revisit the conversation. And so my mom turned to me and she grabbed my shoulders and she said, Tracy, it's really important that everybody gets to be together outside at recess. And nobody's left out. And that includes you, okay? And I'm like, yep. And so the recess bell goes. And I've got my shoelaces tied, but my friends don't. And it's my job to get everybody together outside. My entire shoelace. Well, nobody knows how to tie their shoelace. So I'm like busy trying to tie everybody's shoelace. And by the time recess was over, of course, I hadn't tied all the shoelaces. So my mom and the principal come to me after school and they say, so did you get outside for recess? And of course I say, no, Mom, I didn't get outside with everybody at recess, with the principal listening, right? So then they go over to the teacher to ask what happened. And the teacher told them, well, Tracy tied everybody's shoelaces, but by the time she did, recess was over. And so, you know, what's really uncanny is, why is it that the only girl with no hands had to be able to tie her shoelace, and then all those other able-bodied kids didn't, in order to be able to be included? And, you know, it's sort of like, what are those obstacles? We all have those. We all have these should have, and these policies, and these standard operating procedures, and these beliefs that something needs to be in place to participate. And it probably doesn't need to be in place, right? It's you can do, it's not, I respect that no means no, but I also respect that then you counteroffer and you figure out another way to make it work. It just means no under this understanding. And so that's something that I was very lucky at a young age to have in my book of tricks.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah.
I love the lesson that you're drawing from it, is that, you know, this level of achievement was a totally arbitrary and unfair one.
Yeah.
But beside it, the story's just so beautiful that not only did you think you had to tie your own, but you thought it was on you to take care of everybody. That's so beautiful. And it actually ties right back into your book, because the minute you turn it around to how can I help others, instead of, you know, what did I do to make this achievement myself?
Yeah.
It, you know, out it pours, and you're doing, you know, 20 times more than anybody else by sharing. You know, we all do learn. I mean, I think every teacher will say that they learn the most by teaching.
Yeah.
And that's how they start to actually integrate the lessons.
It's so true. Yes.
So this was this something that happened at birth, that you were born like this, or was this, tell us just a little bit about your background of how it all started.
I was born this way. So both my legs and above knee, that you can't really see in the picture, but they're both legs above knee, and my left arm's above elbow. And I do have a right finger on this side. And this on my hand is my friend Trevor. And I call it Trevor because it's like it's more friendly than spatula, and Trevor helps me eat and write and do ponytails and sail boats and get on chairlifts and scuba dive underwater. So Trevor's like invincible, and so I was born this way, and they don't know why, and it's just a fluke. And my mom, who's British, she's cheeky enough to say that I'm a fluke in more ways than one. And so, and everyone, my sister, my relatives, all the kids since me and all the kids before me and grandparents and ancestors, no one else, it was born an amputee. And that's a funny expression, amputee, because you think of amputated, but it's actually congenital amputee. I was born without the limbs ever growing.
Right. But
I'm so lucky, right? My sister's incredible, but
incredible.
I'm very lucky. I wouldn't be a sailor, a skier. I have an MBA. I've, 8 years at Air Canada, 5 years at Shoppers Drug Mart. I wouldn't have aspired for the Paralympics 2 times, once in skiing, once in sailing. So there's so many things that were invited into my world of possibility because I was a 4-way amputee.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And one of my personal motto, which people have probably heard before because I say it a lot, is every obstacle is a doorway.
Yeah.
And you've really turned what could be something quite overwhelming of an obstacle into such a gift.
And I'm so lucky to see that. Sometimes, obstacles are forced upon us. And I was born this way, so it doesn't even feel forced upon us. But I think things happen. Like someone really close to you passes away, or something happens where, you have an injury and you can't recover from, and then you can't pursue those Olympic dreams that you might have had in a sporting world of side of things, or even on the women's side of now you're having children, and the world that you thought would be as an executive director has changed in that possibility. But when these things happen, positive, negative, I've been lucky to see through. Like, I remember when I left high school and going off to university, I was like bawling my eyes out in fear of going away to school. And that happened again with skiing, and again with sailing, and again with my MBA. And every time it happened, when I got lost, when the two airlines integrated, Air Canada and Canadian Airlines, and it was my role to facilitate the teams back together. There were 15 unions, and they were all like campaigning better dead than red before they integrated into one big airline. And then I was meant to be the one to create these new departments of team building and happy synergistic energy of moving forward with a survival, come out of bankruptcy way of being.
Wow.
And we did it. But I facilitated myself out of a job. And it was very scary, and I was sad. But I also, by this point, knew that every time something major happens, it's always way better than I thought. And within 6 months, I was getting $20,000 more money. I was 10 minutes from home instead of 90 minutes from home. And I had another incredible team. So I loved my Air Canada job, and then I loved my Shoppers Drug Mart job.
Well, tell us, since we're on the Air Canada subject, for just a quick minute, briefly, since you did such an amazing thing there, what was the secret of your success in bringing those two teams together? Just curious.
So, what's interesting is like one of the educational pieces I do for serving customers with disabilities, is I say people first, person with a disability, or Tracy with artificial legs. This customer needs assistance. And so the person is literally first in the sentence. But I think this is true for everybody, no matter what, is person first. And so I've got these 15 people from 15 different unions. Half of them are from Air Canada, half of them are from Canadian Airlines. And they're passionate. Like what I read about later when I did my MBA is that these were very specific strategies. But for myself, I didn't realize as a manager that this was typical. So the men, male-dominated meetings, very few women in there. The men were pounding their fists on the table. They were swearing, which wasn't professional business world. They got up and like walk out the room and say, I'm not having this conversation. And they'd leave the table. And so now, how do you have a collaborative decision when somebody just walked out the room angrily? And so it definitely started from this belief of impossible. And it was just constantly believing person first. And where that meeting came to an end was like that person walking out and pounding their fists. People were saying goodbye once we had our new vision. That for that particular group, it was an employee assistance program. People were saying, if I was on my deathbed, I would want you fighting for my life. I know that you would be that tenacious and that passionate in a stand for somebody else. And that's all they were doing. They were walking out the room because they were protecting all of their guys that, for example, work on the ramp. And so it wasn't just being difficult and ornery. They were protective. They were being Papa Bear about their family, even though it was their workplace. And so it was really person first. What is it that's so real for you? What is feeling so vulnerable? Why is it that you feel a need to walk out the room? What is it that we're not hearing? tell us more where you're coming from. Can we understand you better?
Amazing.
And so it was going back to that person first and understanding and asking questions so people could express their feelings. So all 15 of us really understood each other. And it was time sensitive, but we needed to hear those background perspectives because we were so fast. We took a lot of time on the agenda at the beginning.
Yeah.
I was very afraid of where this was going to go to with time-wise.
Yeah.
But we were so quick in the efficiency of planning when we took that time to authentically understand where people were coming from in the beginning.
Wow. Brilliant. You just shared such a gem with the listeners who have to navigate. I mean, actually reminded me of a time when I was on jury duty and we have a room full of jurists who are stuck, and we really needed to, just like you said, figure out where the person's coming from, make some space for that, acknowledge it, and then we actually came around. And also time sensitive, was like, I got to be out of here by 5.
What do you?
So, a lot of people struggle, and not just people with disabilities, many people struggle with feeling marginalized.
Yes.
How do you paint yourself into the picture so brilliantly?
Well, thank you. So I'm such a storyteller. Every answer, I want to tell you another story. But
Love stories.
You
Tell
love
stories.
So you're mentioning like how I saw the picture. I'm a painter is something that I also do. But what comes to mind is my sailing journey. And you think, so, in 2015, in December, I was at a World Cup regatta with about 40 boats on the line and about, give or take, 30 able-bodied sailors at this World Cup regatta. It wasn't a regatta for people with disabilities. And majority, at least 30 of the 40 of them, were men, big, strong men with big pipes. And they have their arms and their legs. And I'm in this World Cup regatta holding my own in 2015 December. When I started sailing, I was in a waiting room waiting to get my legs, and I was little. And a college girl came in, 18 years old, and she'd had a project about adapting a sailing program. And she said, I would love to turn this into a reality. Can you give me some names of some people that will join my sailing program? And of course, the receptionist said, for privacy reasons, I can't give you the names of our participants and our clients. But I'm in the waiting room and I can hear her. So I'm like, I want to go. I'll do it. And I didn't even have my legs on. So I'm like my bum shuffling after her. So this poor 18-year-old goes from totally able-bodied kids to this girl sitting on the floor with no arms and no legs looking at her saying, I'll do it. And how does she say no, right? So she brings me into her able-bodied sailing program. And because I swim with my legs off, I need to sail with my legs off. And we're all wearing life jackets. But that first summer, because I'm not wearing legs, I'm a bit of a weeble wobble doll falling out of the boat.
Oh.
And so I spent my first summer falling into Lake Ontario. And instead of getting my award, like all the other kids in my class, they got a white sail level 1. And I got a paper fish because I spent more time swimming with the fish. But what really worked for me was that they believed I was capable. Even though it would be scary, a 4-way amputee little girl falling into Lake Ontario where there's ferries crossing back and forth. And I could see why that would be scary. But all the other girls and boys were falling into Lake Ontario sometimes. And we were all wearing life jackets. We all had to pass a swimming test. So it was just as risky for me because I could swim and I'm wearing a life jacket as it was for any of those other kids. And so she believed I was capable and she knew I was having fun. And so she believed I was capable and I could come back. And I believed I was capable. And when I went back that next summer, I learned how to balance in the boat. So instead of weeble wobbling, I learned how to balance. And it turns out I could feel the wind. I had an affinity of it. And so I caught up really quick. I got my white sail level 1 like everybody did last year. Just like everybody this year, I got my white sail level 2. But unlike everybody else, I also got my white sail level 3, because once I figured out how to balance in the boat, I took off with sailing. And that drive, I think because of falling out of the boat so much, the drive to succeed was just so thirsty that I just carried on. And, you know, maybe if I wasn't falling out of the boat, I wouldn't have been so passionate. And so I carried on and I became a sailing instructor. And because I was a sailing instructor, I could apply to teachers college. And because I applied to teachers college, I could teach in Uganda and Jamaica and Nepal and Mexico and and United Kingdom. I've taught in all these countries all around the world, including in the underprivileged areas of Toronto Region Park. So I've taught all over the place. But it started with falling out of a boat sailing. And then I'm like a World Cup sailor that can probably outsail my sailing instructor nowadays.
Just wow. So when you're traveling all over the world teaching, what are you teaching? Are you teaching your own kind of inspirational message, or are you teaching, what are you teaching?
Well, I haven't been teaching my inspirational message directly. Like I've been a grade 4 teacher, grade 12 teacher, grade 4 teacher, kindergarten teacher. So I go and I teach math, science, English, because I have a Bachelor of Education.
I see.
But I find out, like in Uganda, I went with Karabo, which means a gift in Luau. And the leader of Karabo asked the educational facility in Atambe, is there a school that nobody goes to? Where can we go to? And he said yes. And so we went like crazy way north where nobody goes. And, I was there and the kids didn't even care that I didn't have arms and legs. They were like, Munu, Munu, and they were pointing at me. And I thought it had something to do with being disabled because that's what I was used to. But it had nothing to do with being a 4-way amputee because, unfortunately, they had seen so much war that a 4-way amputee wasn't really all that newsworthy to them. The fact that I was white, what they were saying, Munu, Munu, was whitey, whitey. That's all they cared about, was that I had white skin and that I was in this town that nobody had ever really bothered to go to.
Wow.
And they were great. Like, they were so incredible and so humble and so the most generous culture of all the cultures, and had the least that anybody could ever imagine. And they were unbelievably generous with me.
Wow.
And it was incredible. And I forget the start of this question. I don't know where I started. You'll have to repeat the question.
No, you answered it somewhere in there, I'm sure. What's next? I can't wait for your book, first of all, because you're an incredible storyteller and you've had an amazing life. And what's next? Where are you going next with this?
What's so funny is people have asked me that for years. What's next at the end of it all? And I used to joke. I used to say, bobsledding, right? Just half tongue in cheek. But last month I got to go bobsledding. So last week I was presenting at a conference and I shared what I shared with you. I used to say dog sledding. And so someone said, well, so what's an unfulfilled bucket list? And I said, well, jumped out of an airplane. I've flown an airplane. There's so many things. And the guy said, asking the question is like, have you rode a motorcycle? And I said, I have not rode a motorcycle. He said, you are going to ride a motorcycle. And so he's from Cambridge. This conference was in the north part of Toronto. But I think riding a motorcycle is next on my bucket list. I was invited last week by one of my participants in my audience.
That's awesome. But you have a book coming out.
I do.
Are you going more toward becoming an inspirational speaker? And yeah, because I think you're amazing.
And it wasn't like, it's just flourished, right? I had like you say about, I read part of I haven't finished your manifestation book and what you put out there and then it makes it happen. It's almost like that kindergarten story.
Yeah.
And so I put it out there about like teaching and getting a job and instead of being really stuck and confined to specifying be a teacher of grade 1.
Yeah.
I put out there what is the best for me And that's what I'm putting out there, put it into being. And what happened was this free Facebook piece came up about motivational speaking. And so I went to this seminar about speaking. And then that speaking gave me tons of business tools that exponentially has launched me. And one of the tips was about writing a book. And that a lot of speakers that I had seen have books, are authors. So then the next thing that popped up on my Facebook was how to write a book. And it was a free webinar. And it was a live day. You could go webinar or you could go in person. So I went in person. And so I got excited by the book deal. And someone had wrote an article on me in a magazine. So I'd had a photograph of myself by a professional photographer, not like 20 photographs, a photograph. And so I sent that one photograph and we mocked it up into a mock book cover and I shared it. I'm like, check out this book cover. I just got inspired by a book. 800 people liked it. Wow. 136 people shared it.
Wow.
And then Niagara Falls reached out and said, we'd like you to speak at Women in Leadership and Business. And then, CNE reached out and said, we'd like to talk to you about some business. And then, all these, and then Uber, a past client of mine, reached out and said, we'd like to do more business with you. And just like, all I did was share a photo of an idea that got inspired by, and it blew up into Unstoppable You. Not Unstoppable Tracy, but Unstoppable You, which was the name of the book. And I've been, and yourself. I created a fan page, Unstoppable You, and it's only been up 4 days, and you and I got connected. Yeah. And so it's just like incredible what wonderful things have snowballed.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing. I want you to, I know that your book is Unstoppable You, so you're going to be offering those gems to other people, how they can be more like you.
Yeah.
What is it? What is just our time for our last question? We've gone over because I just can't stop talking with you. What's the one piece that can tell someone how to turn, let's say, their handicaps into their biggest asset? What's the one word of advice that you would share with people to help them express themselves and make that huge difference that we each can make in our lives?
I think, a big obstacle often, whether it's an angry conversation or someone that intimidates us, or writing a book, or taking on a new business adventure, or talking to our teenagers because they've stopped talking to us, like whatever it is, often we're stopped because we don't know how. And, when I started skiing, I was at a conference, a personal development awareness workshop, like the services that you offer, to how to self-love and have that coaching. And I think coaching is so important from people like yourself. And he heard me talk, and he came up to me, and he'd just been to the mechanic that day, and the mechanic didn't have legs, and the mechanic wore rubber Wellington boots backwards. And he did some balance, and he didn't need the toes because he was just stumps. And he said, I'm going to get you skiing. So we stuffed my thighs into men's boots backwards. And then because the boots were backwards, it helped me balance on the ski hill. And I skied with snow blades instead of skis. So they were double tipped, even though the boots were backwards. And we were skiing this run in Newfoundland Corner Brook. And it was called OMJ. Please forgive the political incorrectness. It means Oh Me Jesus. And that's because when you look at it, it says, Oh Me Jesus. One of those moments. And he's like, you took a wrong turn. The only way down now is to go. We just have to go forward. And what didn't work for me was that my coach was trying to avoid OMJ. He didn't know how I was going to do it. He knew we'd figure out how I would ski, but he didn't know how I would ski OMJ. But because of the wrong turn, I ended up skiing it anyway. And I skied in the trees 12 times. I every time I was meant to go down, I veer off into the trees. And I get up and I go down and I just veer off the other side into the trees. And that was the Monday. And on Friday, I wanted to ski it again. And I knew I would still wipe out. Instead of 12 wipeouts, I wanted to do 11 wipeouts. And my coach was like, oh no. He says, we got to catch an airplane. It might be the only run you do. And I said, that's okay. I just want to improve a little. And I want to see how far I've come this week. We skied and practiced for 5 days, right? So the Friday we go back and we skied 20 runs all over the place. And I'm getting in the cab and I am bummed. And my ski coach is like, what's wrong? And I said, you promised me we would ski OMJ. And he said, you did. I said, no, we didn't. And he said, yes, you did. He said, you didn't even recognize it. You did it. And I didn't recognize it. And so, all of us have these moments, whatever they are, where we're saying to ourselves inside, OMJ, oh my goodness, what is this going to be like? My teenager, my boss, my neighbor, talking about a fence building, whatever, writing a book, spending $35,000 on a big expensive investment to launch a business, whatever that might be. But that OMJ moment, it doesn't matter that you don't know how. Just go. Just do it. Just jump. You'll figure out the how. Don't let not knowing how stop you. If you have that burning desire and this is what you want to do it. You'll figure out the how.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's totally what I'm doing with A to Z Healing Space. We are creating it as we go forward. We're not planning for 2 years.
No.
It's just go. So you're brilliant. You're wonderful. I'm so glad somehow we found each other.
You were brilliant. I feel kindred spirit, my friend.
Yes, we met and it was meant to be. So how can people reach you? How can they find you?
Unstoppabletracy.com.
Perfect. Perfect.
Everything's Unstoppable Tracy.
Awesome. Well,
anywhere and everywhere.
Thank you very, very much for being my guest on Paint Yourself into the Picture. You're just absolutely brilliant and wonderful and so much fun. And I know my viewers loved meeting you, and thank you to my viewers for being here with us today. If you like what you're seeing, stay in touch. My website is rebalinker.com. My Facebook group is Leaders in Self-Love. And if you want to learn more about the new online healing community, go to atozhealingspace.com. Join us again next week for another healing conversation. Until then, remember to shine your light. Learn how to paint yourself into the picture, because this is how we heal. Many blessings.